Okay, time to do a video. This is Tom negotiating with Jesus. There are three videos I wanted to do today, and one is I want to tell you a little bit about Richard. So I had a talk with Richard. He's a young man who came through youth group and was one of the ones who really has run with Jesus. Uh, he's made it very obvious that he is all in with Jesus, and he's living a life that's a high level follower as a young man. So you see that happen. I guess some of these pastors see that all the time, but I see kids in all kinds of different levels of commitment and and willingness to speak about Jesus and willingness to share openly. So they're human like all of us. So, but I had a long talk with Richard last night, and he shared one of the things that was interesting with Richard was as he became a believer and he was came to accept Jesus at a youth camp, a youth retreat. So as a young man, he felt that was his first big, powerful connection. I think was that youth retreats and youth group was important to him. It shaped him in some dramatic way. He made a life commitment that was his biggest commitment. So that was a thing with him. But as he's grown, he continued to walk in faith and just was hungry for people to tell him what to do with this commitment. So he was a part of every youth group. He started with me, but he said, "You're not feeding me enough. I got to have something I need to go to 4 youth groups." So he was in every youth group, which was terrific. He was mentored by a lot of terrific people. So Richard has grown up, and he's now well on his way to being established as an adult in a career path. And some things he's still young and has some big commitments and big decisions to make. But one of the things he said when he came back after he graduated and was in college and was starting to work through some things, and he'd seen what other Christians brought, and he'd heard testimonies. And one of the things that kids growing up in the church struggle with is, in some way, they're almost too churched. They are cared for well, and they're surrounded by a faith community, and they have some real amazing structure. And then they hear a testimony of someone whose life was dramatically changed, and they think, boy, my testimony isn't as powerful, isn't as dramatic as that. So Richard at one point, and this is how I remember it, said, I want to face more tragedy. I want more tragedy in my life, or something like that, some testing. And I think my response back was, man, you don't have to ask for that. You'll get that. That's part of life that you can't miss out on. The tragic parts of life you can't miss out on. You get them no matter what. And that's one of the strange places we're in politically right now in our world is we seem to think that some people are missing out on suffering. It's like, if you know anything about humans, you know that they suffer. That is guaranteed. Humans suffer. So I said to Richard, what I remember is, don't worry, you'll get your share of suffering. You don't have to rush that along. So he called me yesterday, and we talked for a couple hours, and he told me about some pretty significant events in his life recently, since January. So now it's the end of March. And 3 big things, but it was a personal failure that he struggled with, which had to do with his career, and just a big misstep, or a thing that he wanted to accomplish and do well, that he had a setback in. So that was it. It shook him in some way. That was he really felt that it was a growth period because he felt he was really knocked down. And when you see yourself get up, that's a big thing. The second thing, that wasn't the important thing to me. The other thing was a tragedy that involved someone very close to him. And the thing about tragedy and the thing about sin and the thing about everything in life, it's not self-contained. It gets on others. So whatever you go through, it gets on other people in one way or another. It changes you and the way you interact. Or if someone has, something tragic happens to one person, you feel the ripple effect of it. Someone's loss. So I'm not going to tell his story exactly, but I was ready to cry with him. And we were, 800 miles apart, so 900 miles, I don't know. So it wasn't like I could really sit with him, but as he told the story, it was very dramatic and moving, and it was a friend who had lost his life. And it was just, that type of thing is world shaking when you're relatively young and you lose somebody in your life, and the reality of mortality, that we're destructible, we think we're indestructible, and then all of a sudden we find out, oh, you can die very young. It's funny if you look at like Morrison or any young person who makes the comment, I'll probably never live to be 30, which is like every human at some point makes some kind of comment, some kind of glib comment about how, they're ready to face death or something like that. They know they're going to die. And at some point you make some statements, but it isn't real necessarily until it hits close to home. And I've had, a couple of young people die when I was fairly young. I had some young people die. So I don't know if I wasn't real young. So, but at any rate, that's just something that really shakes you. And the story that Richard told about losing someone, and then as he told about his relationships with different people. And when people share their stories, so what I want to make this video, as I just conclude here, is the idea of whatever your story is, if you think it's not tragic enough or not dramatic enough, the surprise is, and it's being played out so well in YouTube right now, the surprise is that people love to hear anybody who's willing to share their story. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. If you follow a lot of the YouTube stars that are just putting content out, it is as mundane as it possibly could be. There's a ton of content out there that's mildly amusing and silly, but it's not that people want drama. They just want to know that there are other people out there that are like them, that maybe their life is just a daily dull repetition, that life does seem to be mundane and a slog that we're slogging forward, and it's not clear to others. It's clear to yourself. Maybe you're feeling, I don't know if my life's going anywhere. I don't see dramatic successes. It's just turns out to be just some kind of bland affair, and I thought it would be different. That's a young person's realization, is when you start realizing that life is just a long, slow, not dramatic, day after day type process. But I want you to know that, and I want to present that is still a great story, that your story is important to others. And we need to, in this time, be more willing to share our story. We're in some kind of transition. And to be real and share your life a little more openly, and not pretend. What this generation doesn't want is just to have the layovers that you can get on Instagram, that all of a sudden your skin looks clear and you've got little cat ears and whiskers and you're beautiful. Everyone knows that's done with fake props. So if you're presenting yourself too beautiful, I think people know now that it's some kind of layover. And we have to present ourselves as just even less than ordinary. We're just people all struggling together. And present yourself as not shiny and perfect. Present your imperfect self. So that's one of the things that the discussion with Richard, one of the things that was important to me is that we have to present ourselves as real. And also we have to present what we think is worth doing. We have to model it. Present yourself as real, and then don't talk about the things that you think should be imitated. Make sure you're showing them. So there's a little talk about telling your story. It's 11 minutes in. That's a little long. So I'll put this up. And thank you, Richard, for sharing. Definitely, if you know him, talk to him, ask him his stories. Definitely an interesting character. Thank you, Richard, and I'll post this up. Like and subscribe, comment. This is Negotiating with Jesus. Tom, see you later.